voice of the people is the voice of Almighty. But we have said judgment still, loot and fire. Me see it crystal clear. Them sell the people in a deep despair.
Alright, today is the 30th of October 2016. This is Ryan at ClovisStar.com. I think the media does influence people. It's sad to say, that people trust the media, that people can't think for themselves. I honestly think that people without the media would have different opinions on the world. And they wouldn't be so consumed with race and, this divide and conquer attitude. So for the Lavoy, Finicum, and Ammon Bundy and all that that went on in the wildlife refuge in Oregon, the outcome of the not guilty verdict, which I celebrate, I get all this stuff about white privilege, and I made a video about it, and I had a few people on my Facebook page ask me, like, is this real? Are people really talking about race, making this a racial issue? I mean, these guys that resisted the government when the government was, being terrorizing these ranchers like the Hammonds, Dwight and Steve Hammon is who they went out to defend. And all these ranchers from multiple states, from Nevada, Utah, Arizona, drove to Oregon, left their businesses, their families, everything behind, and put their life on hold. And they went to go defend Stephen and Dwight Hammon, who not only was tried on a bunk charge because they set fire breaks so that their ranch wouldn't get burned, in a wildfire, which they have often in that area. And my family's rancher family, we know all about fire breaks and controlled burns and burning off invasive species, things like that. And I used to work for the irrigation company, and we used to do it for the irrigation company all the time. Growing up, 14 and 15 years old, I used to work for the irrigation, and we used to have a big tank of propane, and we used to have a torch on it, a blowtorch, and we'd go and we'd set fires for hundreds of yards that we would control. We would sit there with water and, fire control equipment, and we'd put it out after it reached a certain area. We'd cut it back, 10 to 15 yards just to create a fire break. And sometimes more, sometimes it'd be a bigger fire break. But that's what they do. And so that's what the Hammonds did. The fire burnt 139 vacant acres that had no buildings, no anything on it. And so, they put the fires out and so on and so forth. This was like a decade ago. This was more than a decade ago on one of the charges. And so anyway, they convicted them. They served a year. They got out after serving their time in full. Then the BLM's like, oh, wait, nope, we need you to resentence them. They need to spend a whole 5 years in prison. So they played double jeopardy, which in, many aspects is illegal, at least from what I have heard from lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I hear. And so when they resentenced them to more time in jail after they've already served their time and paid $400,000 worth of fines for burning acreage that wasn't being used, and in fact was assessed to have helped the land and improved the value because it had all this, dead brush and, things that were a fire hazard on there that they helped burn off. And so it actually improved the value of the land. They said that it improved the value of the land by $100. So Stephen and Dwight Hammon did no damage to anything. They improved the value of the land that the BLM said was theirs, that they accidentally burned. And no victim whatsoever, and yet they had to serve 5 years after serving their year that they got initially. They had to go back and serve the rest of this 5-year sentence, despite what the original judge said. So then, these ranchers from all over the western states, like I say, like 4 or 5 states, I think Utah, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, all these different places that they came from to defend. One guy came from back east. I can't remember, Pennsylvania, I believe. Anyway, all these people that came, these militia people came to defend the Hammonds against a tyrannical government, and they risked everything. They risked their lives, their businesses, their, families, being that they could get shot and killed like Lavoy Finicum did, and, their families could be without a father, like Lavoy's family is right now. Well, anyway, all these people, instead of saying, well, thank God that, this jury was reasonable. Look, these people that, protested and exercised their free speech to defend these people. They didn't shoot a single, shot. They didn't hurt anybody. There was no victim. Well, they got off, so let's celebrate. No, instead, people like Sank, whatever his name is, from the Young Turks, Sank Ugar or whatever. I have no idea. I can't pronounce it. And other media people. I saw the LA Times also posted something related to this. And all they talk about is proof of white privilege. So I wanted to, go through some of the things. I had a friend, a longtime friend, somebody that I've known since grade school, basically removed me from Facebook today. Let me see if I can find that. And I'll show you what I'm going through with people that let the media think for them. Like, they don't even get what white privilege means or how their divide and conquer attitude is hurting the people's chances of survival. So here it is right here. And I posted lengthily, and this person removed me. Whatever. I guess that's how it goes. I'll have to remove these names. So I'm on a rant today. This is what my friend says. She says, I'm on a rant today. I have been reading the news from North Dakota and watching the videos that have been posted. I also read the news coming out of Oregon about the acquittal of the armed men on federal property, the Dickhole Bundy and friends. I'm angry and embarrassed of this country. I can't believe that people are so arrogant. I can't believe that the federal government cannot honor their treaties because of their greed. I'm tired of hearing, seeing, and reading and listening to the mainstream media. Well, then stop watching it anyway. And this is what my point is that she's tired of the mainstream media. Well, then don't watch it. Anyway, I'm tired of hearing, reading, seeing, listening to the mainstream media that only has been posting negative things and focus on two idiots running for president. I'm tired of people hurting their own countrymen and women because of one's opinion. Why can't the people's country forget about their amended rights? The ones that say you can have the freedom to do anything, and start thinking about how their decision making is going to hurt others. It's sad to know that this is what our country has become. So first of all, she admits that she's getting all this money, all this information, all this media from mainstream media. Well, that's her first problem. Instead of listening to independent media, doing the research herself, that's her first problem. Secondly, she goes off and shames the Bundys. They have never hurt anybody. Originally in Nevada, they had the federal government coming to their land and trying to confiscate cattle, which they took over 100 cattle, like $100,000 worth of property, and slaughtered them and buried them in the desert. I mean, that didn't do anybody any good. The federal government came and robbed them and then didn't even use the meat usefully. They didn't even give it to those in need or, reintroduce the cattle to a proper grazing situation or anything. They just took them, killed them, and buried them. And so the Bundys in Nevada defended themselves. Well, then they saw the Hammonds go through all this that they've gone through. Their first offense of arson was from 2001. Then their second offense was from 2006. No damage, no victim. In fact, they improved the land that they burned, which was a common practice. Knowing that as coming from a ranching family and somebody who worked on the irrigation, I know that that's a positive, not a negative thing. And so anyway, so they pay $400,000 worth of fines. Meanwhile, the government's trying to buy their property. Ever since 2001, the BLM has tried to buy the Hammonds' property. The Hammonds have continuously said, no, this is our homestead. This is where our family has always been. We're not giving up our property. So, and all this uranium stuff is going on. And we see this from WikiLeaks now, that Julian Assange just released the Podesta emails showing that Hillary Clinton sold 40% of the United States' uranium to Russia. And a lot of it came out of that area. There's a huge uranium deposit right there in that area, about less than 25 miles away from the Hammonds Ranch. They know of a major deposit, and they say there's some right underneath the Hammonds Ranch, which is why the federal government wants that property. Well, after the Hammonds say, no, you can't have our property, then they start charging them. 10 years later, they start charging them with arson. And then they sentence them to all this crazy amount of time in prison and just go under a major siege of the Hammonds. And the Hammonds were warned by the feds, hey, don't have anything to do with Ammon Bundy. If you do, we're going to make life hard on you, put you in a prison that has less medical facilities. And the old man needs medical help. So they're threatening him, saying, hey, if you associate with the Bundys, we're going to take you to prison early. We're going to bump up your check-in date, and we're going to put you in a facility that doesn't have adequate medical facilities. And so they had to cut off contact with the Bundys, and this came out in court. The younger Hammond, Justin Hammond, I think. I can't remember if that was his name. Anyway, Rusty Hammond. I'm sorry, the son of Dwight Hammon and the brother of Stephen Hammon. Rusty Hammond said that if their family was to have contact with Ammon Bundy anymore, that the feds had threatened to make life hard on the two in prison. And that came out in court. That was a signed affidavit by Rusty Hammond. Anyway, Now all these people are fretting that they didn't go to prison. Like, who was their victim? You know, when they exercise their First, Second, 14th Amendment rights and whatever else, when they exercise their constitutional rights and they, you know, they're armed, so what? I proved that going to a federal building armed, like I did down at the, or I guess it was a state building, but I went down to the Maine State House with my rifle fully loaded on February 5th, the day that Lavoy Finicum was buried, and I went down there to hold a vigil for him and protest what happened. And I went down there with my rifle, and I didn't get arrested. Why? It's because it's not illegal. So those guys having a weapon at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge was not illegal. Secondly, their protest was not illegal, having free speech. And so this one right here is saying, this girl right here is talking about that she is upset that people can't have their right to redress grievances and this and that. Federal government can't honor treaties because of their greed, blah, blah, blah. It's like people can't see past their own nose. And they listen to mainstream media tell them that all these people are horrible. And so I said, because people are armed, that should not be afforded constitutional protection. When people bring up the protesters in Oregon, they bring up that they had guns. Do we all of a sudden not have a Second Amendment? Everything that they did at that refuge was protected by the Constitution. First Amendment, the right to peaceably assemble, the right to free speech. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. People say that they, quote, got away with it scot-free. Got away with what? Using their constitutional rights to stand up for the Hammonds, who got railroaded by the government and for a controlled burn on their property. They served their time, and the government played double jeopardy and resentenced them. So these cowboys put their lives on hold to go to Oregon and protest. They all had farms and businesses and families, yet they stood up for their fellow men the only way they could, and they risked everything. One man gave his life, paid with blood, to stand up for the Hammonds. Now we have to play, quote, the white man gets away with everything? I don't think Lavoy Finicum's family feels that way. How many no DAPL protesters have lost their lives? This divide and conquer shit has to end. This is my take up on it. I wrote a long blog and made a video on the matter, and I even addressed the fictional white privilege bullshit. And I said, the day that we all unite against oppressive forces is the day that those oppressive forces lose power over us. This is my white privilege commentary, because I hear so damn much regarding the Bundys and those protesters. And then just to show you a little bit, the Young Turks. I mean, you look at the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos that all they talk about is racism. Race, 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 race. Hundreds of videos. I can't even count how many. I go down, there's so many on racism. And then the other term that I looked for was white privilege. And every other day they're putting out a new video, white privilege this, white privilege that, white privilege this, white privilege that. It never ends. That's what they talk about. And that's what, I mean, they've got millions of subscribers, and that's all they talk about. They've got 3,110,000 subscribers. And it's people like this, my friend on Facebook that I've known for 20 years, that buy into it, that suck it up, hook, line, and sinker. You know, and I'll just post my video. I'm not going to go into the white privilege talk again, because it's so ridiculous, the way that people think. And they can't see that white people get killed by police more than black people. And they're talking about how, oh, look what's going on with no DAPL, all these people getting arrested, and then these white men out in Oregon get vindicated of their charges. Well, they all got arrested. They all spent the last 10 months in prison. Half of them pled guilty to get a plea deal, so a lot of them will be in prison for the next 4 years, and one man lost his life. How is that white privilege? If that's white privilege, I'll just go ahead and pass on that, thank you. I don't want any more white privilege. If that's what white privilege is, no thank you. And then you realize how many white people get killed by police compared to black people. 62% of police killings are of white people. White men, and that's white men, 62% of police killings are of white men. White men only make up 38% of this country. And white men, compared to black men, do 1/6 less murders per capita than black men. Black men account for about 50% of the murderers in this country. White men account for about 42% of the murderers in this country. And black men only make up 6.6% of the population. White men make up 38% of the population. So it should be, you know, if it was equal and fair and everything, white men should have roughly 38% of the murders. Black men should have roughly 6.6% of the murders. But instead, that small minority of 6.7% or whatever, 6.6, 6.7%, depending on the year, has roughly between, and it varies, between 45 and 50% of the total murders in the country. That's why there are a lot more black people in prison than white people, because the murder rates and the violent rates are higher. And yeah, certainly when they commit violence and they get arrested, they often have marijuana or some other drug on them, coke or whatever else. But that's just one of the many charges they get. They get it for murder or for violence, and then they also get it for drugs because they have a higher incident rate. So because black people have a much higher incident rate with police, they should be getting killed by police more than white people do. But that's not the case. White people, white men, account for 62% of police murders in this country. Where is all the white privilege? Where is it? I'm still looking for it. Anyway, you can see my video. I've got a link in the description. Thanks for tuning in.